Have you ever had a season where everything seemed to fall apart at once? A season where one problem came after another, and before you could recover from the first pain, another one was already waiting? That is where the story of Ruth begins. Before Ruth became known as a woman of loyalty, faith, and legacy, her story began in grief. Before her name became connected to hope and redemption, Ruth first walked through loss, uncertainty, and painful decisions. The story begins in Bethlehem during the time when judges ruled Israel. It was a difficult time. Life was not always stable, and families were simply trying to survive. Then something painful happened. There was a famine in the land. Bethlehem was supposed to be a place of bread and provision, but now there was hunger. Food was scarce. Families were worried about tomorrow. Among the people living there was a man named Elimelech. His wife was Naomi, and they had two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Elimelech had a family to care for, so when the famine became too hard, he made a difficult decision. He decided to leave Bethlehem and move to the land of Moab. Imagine Naomi walking away from everything familiar, her home, her people, her memories, the place where she probably thought she would grow old. She did not know what life would look like in Moab. She did not know if the move would bring relief or more pain. But she followed her husband, carrying hope in one hand and fear in the other. Moab was not their homeland. It was a foreign place with different people, different customs, and different ways of life. But for a while, it became their home. Maybe Naomi thought, this is only temporary. We will stay here until the famine is over, and then one day we will go back. But life does not always go the way we plan. While they were in Moab, tragedy came. Elimelech died. Naomi lost her husband. The man who had led the family out of Bethlehem was now gone. The person who shared her worries and helped carry the burden of survival was no longer there. Now Naomi was a widow in a foreign land. She still had her two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Maybe in the middle of her grief, they became her comfort. Maybe she looked at them and thought, at least I am not completely alone. Over time, her sons married women from Moab. One married Orpah and the other married Ruth. Now the family had grown. There was still pain, but there was also life. There were new relationships, new conversations, and new possibilities. For a while, perhaps life felt like it was slowly becoming normal again. But then, another tragedy came. Naomi's two sons died. Mahlon and Chilion were gone. In one season of life, Naomi had lost her husband. Now she had lost both of her sons. The home that once carried the sound of family, plans, and hope was now filled with silence. Naomi was left with her two daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth. 3 women, 3 widows, 3 broken hearts, no husband, no sons, no clear future. In that time and culture, this was not only emotional pain, it was also a serious situation. Widows were vulnerable. They had little protection and little security. Naomi was grieving, but she was also thinking about survival. Then she heard news from Bethlehem. The famine was over. The Lord had provided food for his people again. Bethlehem had bread again. So Naomi decided to return home. But this journey back was not the same as the journey that brought her to Moab. When she left Bethlehem, she had a husband and 2 sons. When she returned, she had no husband and no sons. She had left with a family. She was returning with grief. Orpah and Ruth started the journey with her. These 2 younger women had also lost their husbands. They had become connected to Naomi through love and suffering. But as they traveled, Naomi stopped. Maybe she looked at them and thought about their future. They were still young. They still had families in Moab. They still had a chance to remarry, rebuild, and find security. Naomi did not want them to suffer because of her pain, so she told them to go back. She encouraged them to return to their mothers' homes. She hoped they would find rest and new husbands. Naomi loved them enough to release them, even though she was already lonely. This was not an easy goodbye. The Bible says they wept. These women had shared grief. They had buried dreams together. They had become family through suffering. At first, Orpah and Ruth did not want to leave Naomi, but Naomi continued to urge them. She explained that she had nothing more to offer them. From her point of view, following her looked like choosing hardship. Eventually, Orpah kissed Naomi goodbye. It does not mean Orpah was careless. She was grieving too. She made a painful decision to return to her people and her home. But Ruth did something different. Ruth stayed. Naomi told her again to go back, just as Orpah had done. But Ruth refused to leave. This is the moment that reveals Ruth's heart. She was not staying because the road ahead looked easy. She was not staying because Naomi could offer her wealth, comfort, or security. She was not staying because she knew how the story would end. Ruth stayed because of love. She stayed because of loyalty. She stayed because something in her heart had made a decision deeper than convenience. Ruth told Naomi that she would go where Naomi went. She would live where Naomi lived. Naomi's people would become her people, and Naomi's God would become her God. It was a powerful decision. Ruth was leaving behind the land she knew. She was leaving behind the possibility of an easier life in Moab. She was choosing an uncertain future with an older widow who had nothing to give her but companionship, grief, and faith. And that is what makes this moment so beautiful. Ruth did not know that her loyalty would become part of a much bigger story. She did not know that in Bethlehem she would one day meet Boaz. She did not know that her painful beginning would lead to redemption. She did not know that her name would be remembered for generations. All she knew was the next decision in front of her: stay or leave, love or walk away, faith or fear, and Ruth chose to stay. So Naomi stopped trying to convince her. Together, the two women continued the journey to Bethlehem. Picture them on the road, an older woman carrying grief from the past, a younger woman walking beside her into an unknown future. No wealth, no clear plan, no guarantee that life would be kind to them. Just loyalty, just faith, just one step after another. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred. People recognized Naomi, but she was not the same woman who had left years before. Pain can change a person. Naomi's name meant pleasant, but she felt bitter. She felt empty. She believed she had left full and returned with nothing. But here is something Naomi could not see yet. She did not return completely empty. Ruth was standing beside her. Sometimes when we are in pain, we only see what we lost. We cannot see what God has allowed to remain. We cannot see the quiet gift walking beside us. We cannot see that the next chapter has already begun. Naomi saw grief, but God saw a future. Naomi saw emptiness, but God saw Ruth. And Ruth's small decision to stay would become the beginning of something much bigger than either of them could imagine. That is the lesson in this part of the story. Sometimes the road to purpose begins with pain. Sometimes the story that will one day inspire others starts in a season where everything feels broken. Ruth's story reminds us that loyalty matters, faith matters, small decisions matter. You may not always understand what God is doing in the painful beginning. You may only see the loss, the closed door, or the long road ahead. But sometimes the decision to keep walking is the beginning of a bigger story. Sometimes the choice to stay faithful in a hard season becomes the doorway to restoration. And sometimes what looks like the end is only the first chapter. This was Ruth's painful beginning, but it was not the end of her story. In the next part, Ruth enters the fields of Bethlehem, not knowing that favor is waiting for her there. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Lesson in the Story for more meaningful Bible stories, personal stories, and life lessons, because every story has a lesson.